sooner. We're going to repeal it even sooner, so we're not stuck to it. And we said, okay, let's see what happens. Years passed. The administration can't repeal the law. It takes Congress to repeal the law. This fingerprint-based background screening provision was authored by Senator Richard Burr, a very conservative Republican from North Carolina, and had bipartisan support, unanimous support by Congress. So I don't think the law is going to be repealed. I don't think the administration can repeal the reg, because this isn't really tied to the reg. The law specifies it, the reg implements it, but it is the law that requires the fingerprint background check. So it applies to licensed, regulated, and registered care. Religious exempt are regulated in some form, which is why it applies to them. What I hope next year or the year next, when we come back and have this discussion again, is that we don't talk about the providers. That the discussion is, how do we best keep children safe? How do we make sure that people who are employed by or are in the business of providing child care are not at risk, and not putting children at risk. So that's the purpose of the background check, screen out people who don't belong in the business. So we're not really opposing, but I feel like we were supporting Delegate Fillicorn's bill, and I just felt compelled to say, we're gonna support you with another 2 years, but to have a public voice as to what the purpose is, who sponsored it in Congress. The Trump administration can't repeal it. Congress would have to repeal it. And why it applied. So we'll see you in 2020, I guess. But just want to put out there, it's not about providers, it's about protecting children. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate your advocacy. I sincerely do. Anyone else in opposition? All right. Did you have a question or a comment? Or
you know, after learning this, I would thinking about moving to reconsider the vote, having voted on the prevailing side, so I can vote against the move delay on the table.
Which bill?
On Fillicorn's bill.
Okay.
On 11, if I could move to reconsider the vote that we laid that bill on the table. It's not going to change the outcome, but I just want to vote no.
All right. So I don't have this. We have this bill before us. I don't have an motion on this bill, but let us deal with that before we then take up that motion. I'll certainly entertain that motion as well. So. All right. Members have any questions of the delegate? Understand what we're voting on?
Could I just, Mr. Chair, ask a point of clarification? Because I mean, I am sympathetic to the testimony we heard that, you know, having worked in child welfare, we want to make sure our children are protected if they're in child care environments, and it sounds like that might be a conversation to have at a later date, depending on the outcome here. But I just want to be clear on what exactly this measure accomplishes. It will extend, children will, child care providers and religious exempt institutions will continue to have fingerprinting done up to a new sunset.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, the short answer to that is correct. I wasn't going to, but to fully respond to the statements that were just made, yes, the federal act did pass, but it was as it related to the federal funds that flowed through. And it has always been the practice and the policy that if you were taking the federal monies, you had to go by the federal rules. The interpretation, and I think it is subject to interpretation, but from the Federal Justice Department has been that if the state regulates, and even as Virginia code, we don't technically regulate religious child daycare centers. That was a language put in the code back in the early 90s when we actually started the whole licensure process. And we purposefully said, these are the ones that are going to have to be licensed, and all licensed, quote, businesses, you got to go through this. But we weren't going to regulate ones that were unlicensed, because those kind of family arrangements. We also said, and religious exempt, because they were kind of the only other place operating to any significant size, we weren't going to regulate, but we kind of put conditions on it. You're going to be exempt, but kind of by our rules. Well, because of that, it's interpreted by the federal government, then we are regulating an entity that is exempt. This committee has acted on a bill already. It was Delegate Fillicorn's, where we're establishing new types of exemptions I don't know if they're gonna have the fingerprint background checks or not. I've sort of been told no, but I'll bet it's coming. Because I can also say, and there are those within our state, well-meaning, well-intentioned, that think every person who ever has contact with a child should undergo federal background check, including fingerprints. Because if you truly want to protect as much as government can every child, I guess you do that. But that's $50 per person for that background check. And as a matter of public policy, where we've tried to come down on the line with this is, well, one, if you're taking federal money, you gotta play by the federal rules. But then we look at, and then where are the problems? And we haven't seen the danger to the children in that previously unregulated segment. So that's kind of why we are where we are. The legislation from the federal level I don't think ever will change. But what's happened have been regulations promulgated at the federal level that have implemented a lot of things and have brought this about.
Okay.
So.
Thank you for the background. I appreciate that.
Alrighty. I don't think we have a motion yet.
No.
Delegate Orex 873.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I just make one clarification?
Yes, ma'am.
Delegate Delaney, I think you had a great question. And I'm working with a family, I work with families throughout the state. I'm working with a family. She's from rural Shenandoah. A couple years ago, they had a background check. It was a home setting. It was not a religious setting. It was a home setting. And Virginia at the time didn't have the fingerprint requirement. So the provider had a name-based check, which was practiced in Virginia, and up to about a year ago or so. 3-month-old baby died in that home. When the police came and did the investigation and did a fingerprint check, they found the woman had 5 aliases. She was on felony probation at the time. The issue is the parents didn't know. They wouldn't have selected her. It was a name-based check. It didn't pick up alias names. You know, it's not that everybody wants to deceive the system. I don't believe that they do. I believe they go into the business because they want to care for kids. They love kids. But, you know, if there's some chance that somebody's going to try and circumvent the system, and we know one means of a background check is more effective than the other, why wouldn't we want the most effective check to protect kids? That's all that we're asking for.
Thank you very much. And the good thing is, at least for the next 2 years, Delegate Orex bill will in fact accomplish that policy, which I think we all share in that regard.
And Mr. Chairman, and if I may, or y'all can defeat my bill, and background checks on the religious exempt entities go away.
As of July 1.
Mr. Chairman?
That's what I wanted to be clear that that's what will happen.
Yep. All right. Delegate
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion, and I would rather pass into law Fillercorn's bill, but I move that we pass the Delegate Orex good bill for 2 years.
Sort of good. Sort of good bill.
Good, but not.
All right, been probably moved and seconded that House Bill 873 be reported as introduced. Members will vote on their electronic voting record. And that measure passes on a 7-0 vote.
Mr. Chairman.
And before you make that motion, you can, the equivalent of a gray sheet, we can certainly, and Becky can certainly edit your vote and edit your vote.
Okay.
We don't
Well,
need-
I mean, in the new,
And you as well.
in the new transparency and reporting votes, I thought maybe we want to do it.
Mr. Chairman, have voted on the prevailing side whereby we laid on the table down Fillercorn, whatever number.
Yes.
I move that we reconsider that vote.
Becky 1120.
All right.
Thank you.
It's been probably moved and seconded that we bring up for reconsideration 1128. That just requires a voice vote.
Actually, it was stricken from the docket according to this.
Well, we struck it.
Whatever motion we made, we'll
Okay.
reconsider it.
We need to reconsider the striking of it, that we bring it
Right.
back and put it back on the
Aye.
docket. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? All right, it's now probably before us. We've heard the issues.
Mr. Chairman, I move we strike Delegate Fillercorn's bill.
All right. Probably moved in second that 1128 be stricken from the docket, as was the patron's request of the chairman and in writing to council and to staff and the conversations he had with Chairman Orrock. prior to coming and sitting down and doing this. And I
Still.
apologize if I misrepresented that in any way, because I sincerely did not intend to. I'm just very tired.
Yeah.
And I freely admit that.
No.
All right, the motion before us is to, it's been probably moved and seconded that House Bill 1128 be stricken from the docket as per the patron's request. That does require a recorded vote. And the motion to strike from the docket passes on a 4-3 vote. All righty. Delegate Yancey, you have the last bill for this committee this evening, sir. So draw the committee's attention to, thank you, Delegate Ora, for bringing forward good legislation, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
House Bill 192.
And I believe there is a statute which I have read briefly, so grateful for your indulgence that I think staff has. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, just several extras. Teacher, okay.
Yeah, it's not as easy as it I always had a kid to do it.
Does everybody have one?
So, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, what House Bill 192 seeks to address is an issue that was brought to my attention by a small business owner in the city.
I'm sorry, Delegate Yancey, before we go there, all the members had a chance to at least review this superficially, and I'll have him explain it better once we get to it. All right, let's, by general consensus, we'll adopt the substitute to House Bill 192 as is now before us. Yes, sir, tell us what this does and why we need it, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What this bill seeks to achieve is clarity in the code in regards to the regulations for rainwater or reuse, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, for use of rainwater and reuse of gray water regulations. And what the bill will address is, if you look at lines 16 through 18, the comments in regards to the regulations that we use for the standard use of these rainwater systems to collecting rainwater for commercial enterprises only. The original legislation address both residential and commercial. This one only addresses commercial enterprises, but not to provide for human consumption. And then if you look at lines 19 through 24, what that seeks to address is the use of non-potable gray water, rainwater that is often used by large industries now for their rainwater system and in conjunction with the Virginia Pollutant Discharge Elimination Systems and the like. And then the bottom line is an address to a situation that happened in the city of Newport News, where there's a small business owner that had an innovative and creative ideas to utilize a free resource, which is rainwater, and he was able to capture it on top of his commercial building and then provide it for his business enterprise, which would not be used for human consumption. But regretfully, in his ability to utilize this resource and his innovative and creative idea, which I think makes our Commonwealth and our nation just so exceptional, he ran afoul of the city of Newport News and some challenges with the Commonwealth and the lack of clarity. And the city of Newport News was very firm. We tried to ameliorate the situation, but regretfully we could not. So we brought this bill before the legislature to provide language for those innovative business people, like Mr. Jarvis, who could not be here today, but his wife's here today, to be able to utilize this resource in such a way to the principles of his business, concern for the environment, but also do it in such a way that provides clarity so that those businesses that choose to go this route are clear on what they can do. So it addresses his situation by, at lowercase b on line 21, producing the use of non-potable water on site, including on property that is either contiguous within or in the immediate vicinity of the parcel of land upon which the treatment works is located, which would be his commercial enterprise that he owns, provided that such property is under common ownership or management with the treatment works, which would also provide that clarity. And then finally in the back, in lines 28 through 31, it would regards the use of the Department of Environmental Quality to consider recognizing that his rainwater is an independent source of fresh water available for use by the residents of the Commonwealth. And again, it would provide that language that's needed. I think the key thing here is that I've been on his side, and Ms. Jarvis can speak to it further at the appropriate time as chairman, but Mr. Jarvis has gone to great lengths, and he couldn't be here today because he's operating his business, but again, his wife, his partner with the business is here. What's remarkable is if you go on a tour, it's not just simply where he's got a bunch of buckets collecting water and then he just takes it and whatever bacteria is formed. It's an extraordinary system that he has devised whereby the water is captured. It has UV rays which make certain that the water is clean and clear, and all the necessary scientific recommendations to provide this water, and then the water is being used for the operation of the business, not for human consumption, not for toiletries or anything like that. So this is a great way for him to utilize what essence is a free resource with his own ingenuity to provide that free resource in such a way that can help his business and help scratch out a living. So it's a remarkable system, and I know we're all in session right now, but I tell you, it's so remarkable that I think anybody here who could see what Mr. Jarvis has done would really be impressed by it and would find it to be truly creative and also very innovative, and something that I think other businesses could find beneficial for their industry as well.
All right, sir. Members have questions?
Well,
I'm
Mr.
sure
Chairman,
Delegate
the
O'Rourke.
only real question I have is, we're going from them developing guidelines to now requiring them to do regs, which have the standing of law, whereas guidelines do not. Why do we need to go that route?
So, Mr. Chairman, Delegate O'Rourke, the problem was in regards to being able to work with the City of Newport News, and then what they would point to the regulations of the Commonwealth of Virginia. They were very firm that they wouldn't even I shouldn't say acquiesce. They were very firm in their willingness not to even try and would you say negotiate?
Correct.
Negotiate with the City of Newport News, and it became to a point where it was very heavy-handed. The more he tried to reason, the firmer they became, to the point where they threatened to shut his water off. They threatened to shut his business down. Again, Ms. Jarvis is here, and she can speak to that situation. So the feeling here is, while certainly you hate to have to address it in regards to the law, perhaps this is a way where innovative businesses that want to work with the localities and with the Commonwealth to be able to have these regulations and find a way that they can work together, rather than have the heavy hand of the local government or the state of Virginia refuse to even have that conversation in the first place, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
All right. And ma'am, would you like to speak
Sure,
to House Bill 193?
I would love to.
Sure, just if you would stand and maybe identify yourself.
Sure. My name is, good evening. My name is Leslie Jarvis. I live and own a small business, Go Green Auto Care, in the city of Newport News, Virginia. In 2014, we received an enormous water bill because of a leak under the foundation of our building. It was on our side of the water meter, making it our responsibility. So being an earth-conscious company, we decided to explore a sustainable option. Rain harvesting we felt was the moral and ethical thing to do. So we installed a top-of-the-line, state-of-the-art, ultraviolet purification system. Never could we have imagined the magnitude and resistance we would encounter from the city of Newport News. It turns out if you don't have an active account with Newport News Waterworks, it triggers codes department to come to your location, to your property, and condemn it. So when the inspector showed up and we were able to show him a fully functioning water purification system, delivering crystal clear water both to the toilet and the tap, the codes inspector literally apologized and left our shop in awe. 1 week later, we received a letter demanding that we reconnect to the city water system. And a few days after that, Codes was back with condemnation papers in hand and the police at its side. They forced my husband to close his business. The situation could have easily escalated and ended tragically, and it would have been all over money. Specifically, the fees that Mr. Jarvis was bypassing by not being connected to the waterworks. And that's literally what the representative at Newport News Waterworks said to him. So what we're asking in this piece of legislation is to classify rainwater as a fresh water source. It's a common sense piece of legislation. Rainwater is not wastewater. It can be an independent water supply, as we have successfully demonstrated for almost 3 years now. It also helps mitigate flooding. It reduces demand on wells and aquifers, allowing replenishment, much needed replenishment. Application of rain harvesting systems provides a substantial benefit for both water supply and wastewater subsystems by reducing the need for clean water in the water distribution system. It lessens generated stormwater in the sewer system, as well as reducing stormwater runoff and pollution. This bill isn't mandating anyone do anything. It's simply removing the barriers and bureaucracy for those of us who feel the ethical and moral obligation to preserve the water supply for future generations. Water is not an infinite resource, and we have to stop flushing it down the toilet.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone in the audience to speak in favor of House Bill 192? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Rebecca Laprelle. I'm CBF's Chesapeake Bay Foundation's Executive Director for Virginia. At CBF's Brock Environmental Center, which some of you may be familiar with, we actually use rainwater and gray water to support 100% of our water use. We treat down rainwater, we use it for drinking water, which I understand has been removed from the bill, but we can live with that. And we use the gray water to convert the gray water to water our native plants outside the facility. This helps reduce water use and has the added benefit of reducing pollutants to the Chesapeake Bay, which is something we care a lot about. Happy to answer any questions about the facility, but we thank Delegate for the legislation and we support the bill.
And before you sit down, I apologize, missed something. So are you all, what is this gonna grant you, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, to do that you don't already or can't already do?
We can already do this. We went through, I understand, over a 2-year process to get approval from the health department to use rainwater for drinking water, which is no longer in the bill. The gray water process was not as onerous for us, but it did take a very long time, and I think this is going to provide some regulatory certainty to those who want to move forward in the same direction that we have.
So it's a fair characterization. You're just in favor of the commercialization use as you all are doing for your own foundation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, not for yourself directly. I get it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in support? Yes, sir. Come on forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Matt Wells with West Rock. We operate the West Point Paper Mill. The mill has a unique project associated with it. It's a wet wood storage yard. Wood actually stores better when it's wet, lasts about twice as long. It's an industry best practice. This wood yard is unique in that it uses treated gray water and rainwater. As part of the system, we asked the patron to bring one of the amendments forward that would essentially say that if you're already regulated through a VIPDs or VPA permit, you aren't going to be regulated through this process to provide us a little bit more certainty. So we just wanted to thank the patron for bringing the amendment and thank him for encouraging innovative use of rainwater, which I think is a conversation that we've certainly been a part of. Thank you.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. Others in support? Delegate Bell, you have a question, sir?
No, I think the whole thing's fascinating.
Okay.
My hat's off to this.
All right, very good. Anyone in opposition to House Bill 192 as it's been substituted? I see somebody getting nudged here. Is that a nudging? That's just a stretching.
I think it's
Stay away.
That's just a smile. That's a smile. All right. Yes, sir. Delegate Yates.
No, I was just saying, Mr. Chairman, at the appropriate time, I have just one final comment to make.
Please.
Mr. Chairman, members, just real quick, at the very beginning of our session in January 12th, the Daily Press ran an article commenting about how great ideas can sometimes become law and where they come from. This is a picture of Mr. Jarvis from the Daily Press, and I know we've all had a long day. We could always use a little bit of comic relief, so I will just let you know that the way I met Mr. Jarvis was when I got a telephone call about the situation, and I showed up. There was a sign from my opponent out there in the front yard.
Nice.
No worries. So Mr. Chairman and members, when I say this is a bipartisan bill, this is a good thing for Virginia. But in all seriousness, Mr. Chairman, I think what this article comments about is indeed why we're all serving, and that is great ideas come from the people we represent. If the opportunity to visit with Mr. Jarvis, to see what he's doing, the ingenuity, the creativity, the implication, the science, and how it's really truly ameliorating the situation, I think it's again, I will end by what I began with. It's people like Mr. Jarvis and the excitement that he brings to his small business is what makes our Commonwealth and our nation truly exceptional, and I hope that you'll support the bill.
Second.
And VDH is here. You guys are good? So,
Mr. Chairman, Alan Knapp with the Department of Health. We had spoken to Delegate Yancey about some amendments early, and I
about these amendments or some
different amendments.
Okay.
And so I have a copy of the substitute. I think it's probably the same one, but I'm not sure it's exactly the same. And so it's you know, it's kind of difficult for me to say at this point where we would fall out on it. So
Looks to me like the
administration
pages line up, Alan.
Yeah.
It should be the-
Looks to me like they line up pretty good.
The administration, you know, initially would have said support with amendment, and that was the position. We have amendments, but they're not the same amendments. We've taken potable water out, so that addressed, I think, a fair piece of the concern. You know, we can certainly do this. We have guidelines already, and this directs us to do regulations. We can do that as well. So there's nothing in here that that we can't do. I'm listening to the discussion. I'm not exactly sure what problem we're solving, because I didn't hear a health department problem being described.
No, I don't want to.
And I'm really trying not to do any harm, and don't want to belabor the discussion and draw it out any longer than we have to.
I think what I heard was a sincere effort to try to promote small businesses that see this as an opportunity and are using an innovative and creative and very clever way of capturing what otherwise is deemed to be a non-asset and converting it into an asset. But I absolutely asked you to step up for a reason, because I want to make sure that you guys, at least at this juncture, and I will grant you, it's a. And Chairman Orrock, I suspect this would, I guess, come up next Tuesday probably, perhaps between now and then at VDH and DEQ. I just want to make sure that my first duty as your brand new subcommittee chairman is not to send you poorly constructed bills, sir.
I reserve the right to bring you poorly constructed.
Aptly put. Delegate Sickles.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to ask Alan, did you talk to the Newport News Water Authority on this? I mean, have you having any dialogue with them why they did what they did?
I have not, and that's why I say that it sounds to me, and I'm at the risk of really getting deep into this, that it was the building officials in Newport News that originally said this is not an acceptable water supply.
That's correct. When we installed the rain harvesting purification system, we totally disconnected from the city.
Okay.
And we cut a piece of the pipe so that we were not connected to them at all and capped it off. We had completely isolated, independent water purification system. When they came in, they said, no, that's unacceptable. You have to maintain your connection with the Newport News Waterworks Department. You have to get that fixed, and then you have to have a backflow connector installed to prevent cross-contamination. We want to be totally isolated and independent from Newport News Waterworks, and that would need to be, rainwater would need to be classified as a freshwater source.
Right.
All right, thank you very much. Alan, you good?
Mr. Chairman, if I might, so it sounds to me like it's the interplay, if you will, between the building officials looking for an approved source of water and the health department's role in lending that approval, if you will. And so it sounds to me like this does connect the dots without having to step out and provide an administration position. At this time, I think we can do this.
Well, and look at my counselor at the end of the table. The legal profession says, out of an abundance of caution, sometimes it's somewhat duplicative or more illustrative and more expressing the intent of the General Assembly by going to regulations rather than guidelines. I heard you say that. Delegate O'Rourke.
No,
No?
thank you.
All right, sir. Thank you. I really appreciate your input, sir. All right. Members, did we have a motion?
We have a motion.
To move.
Second.
And it's been moved and seconded that House Bill 192 as substituted be reported. Members will vote on the electronic board. That measure passes on a 6-0 vote. Delegate Yancey, you do not need to be at full subcommittee. If it goes south, I'll prevent it from going further south without letting you know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
All right, members, Delegate Sickles, before you leave, members, we have about 8 bills on for tomorrow morning. Eat your Wheaties. We'll have some of those scope of practice issues, nurse practitioners and so forth. I really appreciate your support. With that, the committee shall rise. I do.
Oh, that's just
Yes.
full committee.
Yeah, I've got him, talked to Julia, she's okay, we're gonna talk to James, James is from the
Okay. Dickie, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I saw it.
Hey, Jeff Campbell.
Those are my goals.
Get away.
long as that's what we're a good, we're a really good place to go.
Fantastic.
So then we'll have.
Okay, I appreciate that. Alright,
Stephen,
Stephen,
they'll go to the Senate. There's the same testimony in subcommittee hearing
Oh,
the bill.
yes,
And
yes.
it's on the uncontested status usually means.
Wow, this is gonna be super late.
Well, thank you.
My kids are with their grandma tonight.
Wow.
I'm gonna go home and have time to myself.
Bottom line is,
Do this? I do, I wanted to.
we are where we need to be and in
Okay.
a good way.
I think that's
So,
what I said.
barring any problems, now we should be systematic. You know, this building in the floor, you know, the center.
I know.
I'm a medical student. I was about this issue.
Oh, hey, listen.
Anytime.
Nice meeting you.
Thank you.
We're trying to do that. I know when I built my building, I put the plans out there. I remember that guy just started.
I remember big bag.
All right, well, this is part of the process. And then I did what was told to do. $1,000 later with the draft, came back and he goes,
Those guys need their residency training.
It's getting old. But you know,
Probably at least 4 to 8 years or so. So here's kind of where it's Sarah has put together a substitute that is more favorable to the voice of those guys. And
like I said,
I'm
cap it,
right to
do it, so number 2 cement on it. It should be fine.
either way. I'm told
Come back with a final plan, you're gonna cap it, number 2, and you meet Steve, the new guy, who's what's all this? Bob said, cap it, administration will be fine. No way. Bob
Then I
said,
just sort of
Bob
had
did
because
it.
I got confused.
Okay.
I got all mixed together, which I don't like.
Thank you for your testimony. I'm fascinated with what you have. It sounds like something a lot of us probably have on our phones.
Well, it'll be a bill for next year.
Yeah, there you go.
Two years
Everyone wants to
community
get off the
college.
road, right? So that is really innovative.
And it's not just getting off the road, but it is taking control.
Yeah. 2-year online.
Yeah, absolutely. And using a resource that, you know.
South Africans doing a lot of that.
And that would get to their masters, so they're now nurses.
Frightening. I just,
The way it's structured,
I just
they
wanted
just
to
have
tell you
someone
that.
sign off.
no?
Well, thank you.
I have no real role, official role, but I hear a lot of testimony. It's
On
fun.
one hand,
I hear a lot of testimony.
I want to say as a committee clerk, I'm supposed to be a
Yeah, and I have no political
I
opinion.
loved your testimony, and I think that idea is fantastic.
Thank you so much.
It's nice to hear somebody. I mean, truly, that.
We did take out the residency.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure, so we read it. Thank you.
All right, lady, let's figure out where we're at.
And I see that.
Because I don't know where, oh, that's, yeah, that's my bag of random stuff.
When I was with
Okay. I have to figure out what I do, where I am, what I do, who I am. I honestly thought this was gonna go super late.
I told my husband, he may not see me until 39.
Yeah, that's what I told Matt. Frank's at,
We got water.
7:30, he's gonna pass out.
Frank's at my mom's, baby's gonna be in bed. Matt's gonna think he had the evening to hang out by himself and play video games. Darn, I'm gonna be home. Not for long though, we got a 7 a.m.
Yeah.
And I just got duty ready for that stuff. Well, I'm gonna be here late, I gotta get all the,
I'm gonna go in and process it.
So I know I represent, and I apologize for interrupting.
Is that all recycling?
No, that's true.
I got
That's
passed through a lot of it. You guys saw what I went through from November to January. So.
I think I've got everything organized.
This is something we can all rally around.
Okay.
And where can we reason together? That's all.
Can I just go in number order? Okay, 106 was tabled.
Well, okay,
194 was stricken.
step in the right direction. I get
192
that.
was report with substitute.
Just wanted to make sure that we didn't oversell it.
260 was strike. 418 was report. 528 is report. 867 was report. 869 was report. 873 was report. 1017 was report. 1128 was strike, reconsider strike.
And there is that connection
1174
with.
was report with a substitute. And 1333 was report with amendments. And then photo trips.
Relying on the health department.
Man, I don't have a lot to get ready out of this one. Can I give you the substitutes tomorrow? I know, but I like to make sure everything's out of the, can we real quick, actually the list, so I go to.
So we're here if you need us.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yep.
You know, I don't know if you wanna meet or try to talk about anything between now and, full committee, what you do, let us know.
And a lot of the resolution stuff I took out because of the exact.
Right, those, yeah.
It wouldn't ram it through, it was just bad, and this one passed.
Wow.
Okay.
That's a record, girl.
But for them, for businesses like them.
Yeah, cool,
I
hot dog.
think if there's a way that we can put it in the code that they can point to.
That's what my
and say,
friend
look,
would say.
we can do this right here by law, so why can't you start getting the regulations? But I'm not
And
trying
then
to
tomorrow,
paint you guys as the bad
subcommittee,
guys.
full committee, subcommittee.
We didn't-
Good times.
That's it, I'm all-
We have like